The way I got into all of this, and it seems to me it's worth talking about because psychedelic, the word has in a sense been too narrow. It's a kind of secret faith having to do with perception of the world, I think. I mean, I feel that I was psychedelic long before I knew anything about psychedelics, because what I was interested in as a child was nature. The next step in my own evolution, and I feel like I am simply the fortunate beneficiary of a series of random events which were very fortuitous from my own point of view. In other words, that without having a whole lot of sense and with very little foresight, I very fortunately found myself in a lot of right places at a lot of right times. And the place I went after adolescence was political awareness. The next great item on the agenda was the community, which brings me to the next of these psychedelic metaphors, or these psychedelic styles that have nothing to do with the compounds, and that is travel. Travel. Nothing is as boundary dissolving as, except psychedelic compounds, as travel. Travel is really up there. I mean, you know, go to these places. There are many, many places, and they are not to be taken at face value. They are parts of your own psyche. They are syntactical intersections of intentionality and cognition. The fact that you have to fly there on KLM is only incidental, you see. Because what you come up against in these other places is cultural relativity. And the deep coming to awareness of cultural relativity is finally permission to look at who you are, not who they say you should be. Because you see that in this tribe, you're an SOB if you fail to eat your uncle at a certain critical time in the situation. And in this society, you're an SOB if you don't own a condo in Carmel. So, you know, how seriously are we to take all of this? Psyche is some kind of semi-malleable medium. And if you set yourself up as a loser, if you image yourself as a loser, you will be a loser, and so forth. This is not big news. But what's big news is that if you set your life up as a quest, you will actually find something transcendental and unimaginable. I mean, I am living proof of this because I set my life up as a quest for a perverse reason, to prove that there was no mystery. In other words, to debunk it, to say, you know, I will follow the ancient formulae and show that it's baloney by doing it perfectly and achieving nothing. That's the kind of guy I am. However, what I discovered was that the model of the world that we inherit, that it's three-dimensional space and very humdrum and you're caught in its laws and like that, it's just not so. I mean, I don't have all the answers, but this is where we need to put pressure, is the world is some kind of thing which can be taken apart and shown to be something else, many other things. And nobody's saying this. I mean, these physicists are just sober as can be. And all this argument that goes back and forth about this paradigm and that paradigm, and whether the world is made of anti-new Masons or the world is obviously made of mind and intention. And I don't mean this in some airy-fairy, can't get a grip on it way. I mean, if the world is made of cognition and intention, then let's get a technology together that allows us to use that principle to make it the way we want it to be. And the psychedelics show, the way it is to be done. It's somehow, I don't know. I don't know. My intuition is very strong that with people with sufficient intelligence and sufficient courage could at any time break through and make this somehow happen. I mean, it's a fantasy of two people having a conversation which ends with the abolition of language, basically. In other words, turn the tools upon themselves and unscrew everything and lay it out and look at it and then rebuild it the way we want to. Now, this could not even be talked about if there were not evidence that it is possible. And the evidence lies in this weird dimension, this psychedelic thing. And I would be utterly despairing of the state of this planet and ourselves if it weren't for the existence of these compounds. I think we would not have the chance of a snowballing hell, not a chance, because everything on the surface spells ruin. We are murderous monkeys. We have looted the future. We have eaten the food of our own children. This is the kind of crowd we are. And yet, there is this shining, transcendent thing that is real. And this is what I hold against all the priests and gurus and rishis and roshis and geishas and babajis around, is they don't explain that what they're talking about is real. I don't even think they know that it's real. Perhaps they're just, parasites on an idea. But it is real, and it is possible to manifest it. The problem is that we are so perversely committed in the way we invest energy. I mean, a modern, well-equipped fighter plane costs $75 million. The United States government orders them in lots of 500 at a time. You know what $75 million would do to consciousness research in California? The cost of one fighter plane? I and the people I know and the people they know could deliver the millennium for that kind of money if, the law stood back. Because what we're talking about is a correlation of data that has gone on now for 400 or 500 years. Botanical data, chemical data, human data, anthropological data, data about language, data about complex systems generally, mathematical models, dynamics, chaos theory, so forth and so on. These are the tools out of which an understanding of the dynamics of mind can be created. And creating an understanding of the dynamics of mind is the way out of the political logjam. No amount of haranguing and preaching is going to do it. It requires a breakthrough to the mechanics of ourselves. That's what it basically comes down to. That we must see ourselves as potentially salvageable, reprogrammable, and worth saving. And I think that because the psychedelic experience is not bound in history, but in a way is a morphogenetic field amplifier of our species. I mean, if you think of the Sheldrakean model of morphogenetic fields, and then imagine that they cannot be detected by radio, they cannot be detected by any electronic means, the field is too subtle. But if you imagine that mind is a quantum mechanically indeterminate and delicately balanced enough system that it can actually resonate to the presence of the morphogenetic field, then you begin to have a theory of what the psychedelic experience is. It's the experience of the transcendent dimension of every object. And every object has a transcendent dimension, more than one. I mean, it has a dimension which extends into the past, it has a dimension which extends into the future, and it has a dimension which is orthogonal to any of these, that is the internal horizon of its own transcendence. Now, this kind of talk is Whiteheadian talk. Whitehead, in the 20s and 30s, actually created a philosophy, a rigorous metaphysic, entirely capable of working in a psychedelic environment. Had he written it in Sanskrit, he probably would have had a wider audience, but he wrote in plain English. So if you're interested in a metaphysic of the psychedelic experience, where you actually take it seriously and say these things which we perceive, the dissolution of boundaries, the recombining of form, the transience of form, the transience of meaning, the coming together of actual events in a real world, and the dissolution of those events into a world of potentiality. This is all Whitehead type stuff. Some of you may know the notion of memes. A meme is the smallest unit of an idea. It's to ideas what genes are to biology. And memes compete in the same way that genes are competitive in an environment. A meme can be copied. I can tell you something and you can tell someone else. The meme has been copied. A meme can be repeated. I can say the same thing over and over again to different people, then copy it and take it away. But in the same sense as a gene is only effective if it remains faithful to its original, the meme must remain faithful to its original. And the only way we can correctly copy these memes and pass them among ourselves is through clarity of understanding. So it's always this pressure on clarity. Nothing should be ambiguous. I don't believe in it. You know, I believe that understanding passes everywhere, and that a thing is not existentially apprehended in some sense until it is understood. And as far as what understanding is, it's simple. It's nothing more than the perception of connecting pattern. So that here is a data field. Could be a beach full of people or a great corporation or the history of England. A data field. What patterns do you perceive in it? The more patterns you perceive in it, the more you understand it. And there is no bottom to this. I mean, understanding just falls through the phenomena of the world endlessly. Essentially, it's about communication. That most of what we say and do, even though we may define ourselves as wide-ranging intellectuals, most of what we say to each other is incredibly animalistic and low-grade data exchange, because we're not used to pouring the energies of cognition into articulate speech. We just tend not to do that. But actually, it's at this stage of things the closest we can get to hardwired telepathy. You know, honest, straight talk that draws from as deep as it can, and a search for well, Blake said this thing. Let's see if I can get it right. He said, "The truth, if it is told so that it is understood, must be believed." In other words, if you hear it and you understand it and it's so, you will automatically give allegiance to it. This is because we resonate with some kind of ground of being that is below the speakable and yet supporting it. So the idea here will be to try and communicate between ourselves to create a slightly different kind of reality than everybody else is hanging out in.